Good morning, everybody. This is Brother Stucki checking in. We're working on your magazine spread critique. And so what we're going to do is I've come in here to Facebook. I'm going to go into the comments here. And I want you all to know this is the first time I've looked at any of your magazine spreads. So this is going to be my first response. And it's important to learn how to receive critical information, how to receive a critique. You're receiving information from the client, and you need to know that you've put a lot of work into this, but there's going to be things said by your client that you don't necessarily like. Sometimes you can get kind of mad about it, and that's not a professional way to act. It's good to know how to give good feedback, and it's good to know how to receive feedback so that you can make the changes that you need to do, the changes that you need to make for your clients so that they're happy. So let's go ahead. We're just going to start looking. But a couple of things we're looking for, remember, is you need to have used InDesign for this project. And if you're having troubles receiving InDesign or the licensing and such, you need to let me know. This needs to be 3 pages long. We're going to have a title page and then the spread. We need to be working in columns, having at least 2 columns of text, 600 words. And you need to have headings. I'm going to be looking for a title. I'm going to be looking for the author. I'm going to be looking for at least 3 subheadings. And that way we can see that you're using contrasting typography. Your headings would be in one particular typeface and then your text would be in another. You need to have a pull quote somewhere in here. And then we want to see 2 images that you shot. That's going to be a big one. I think a lot of you probably haven't caught on to that because we went through photography last week, it's expected that you've taken the pictures for this next part, for the magazine spread. I'm going to be looking for text wrapping, and like I said, tasteful typography, and then a link to the talk. So let's go ahead and take a look here. That our light may be a standard for the nations by Elder Benjamin D. Hoyas of the 70. We got a pull-out quote right here at the top, and that looks nice. We have these 2 columns. Now, we have all of the titles and everything, and the pull-out quote is in a serif typeface. And we have this Y in a serif, and then everything else in a sans serif, and that's nice contrast. I like that. I like the blues that I'm seeing here as well. Looks nice. I like this bleed to the edge. Let's look at the next page for a minute. And we have this picture of Christ here. And we have this subheading here. And so I'm assuming that there's another page somewhere here that will be part of this project. So keep that in mind. You need to have your 3rd page. But also, one of the things that I want you to do is I want you to work on your typography. Notice these jagged edges on the right of your columns and some hyphens and so on. I've put a video out for everybody to watch, teaching you how to get rid of the hyphens and to straighten out these edges. And so that's going to be a big thing I'm looking for. Another thing, remember that you are supposed to have taken the pictures, so that I want to see at least 2 pictures by a student. I don't know if you took a picture of the sky, but I'm pretty sure you didn't take this picture since it's a painting. So that's something you're going to have to look into and see what you can find and be creative about it. That's one of the great things about taking pictures and applying them in a magazine spread, is figuring out how you're going to apply it to your talk, to your magazine spread. So let's go ahead. Oh, and here's page 3 right here. So then we have this picture of the temple and these subheadings again. So it's looking really good, but there's just these few things you're going to need to do. So be thinking, unless you took that picture of the temple. And remember, it's really that this is on your honor. I have no way of knowing for absolute sure whether you took the picture or not, but it's something that you should do. Okay. Let's go ahead and look here. How Can We Make the Most of Temple Attendance by Richard G. Scott. We have nice contrasting typography with our serif and sans serif, and a picture, it looks like to me, of the Rexburg Temple. I'm assuming this is one that you took. And I see you're going to put some, you have your pull-out quote and another one here. So what I want to see is some text dropping around this circle. Watch the video that I put up on Facebook last night about kerning and text dropping, and that will show you how to do that. And we're going to want to see another picture in there somewhere. Remember, it's 2 pictures. Okay. Now, another thing is I want all of you to pick up a magazine and take a look inside. Okay, we open up a spread. I'm looking at the ensign. And when it comes to titles, I really don't see text boxes placed behind them. So that's one of the things I want you to avoid, is creating your boundaries with boxes. The idea with classic graphic design and typography is to create your boundaries with your artwork, but not by creating boxes inside. One of the things I'd like to see is this temple bleed right off the edges of the page. There's no reason to observe the half-inch margin with your picture. It could easily bleed off, and that just really makes it pop out when you open that magazine page. So I want you to keep that in mind. We have another picture here of the temple, and I'd be interested to know if you took this picture, because I can see that there's been a lot of things done to it, and unless you have a lot of experience with Photoshop and Lightroom, as well as photography, I naturally question whether this is your image or not. And so that's the main thing that we got to think about there. And then remember, we were talking about needing to have subheadings. So you're going to want to add some subheadings in here to break it up so we can see the contrasting typography. So let's think about multiple pictures. Let's talk about pictures bleeding to the edge, and let's remove boundary boxes for defining your spaces. See, the great thing about it is if the pull-out quote is done correctly, it doesn't need a box around it. It has enough contrast that people can see that it isn't part of the regular text. And that contrast comes by changing the color, making the font bigger, using a contrasting typeface, and so on. And so it can really be fun to do, look in a magazine to see what they did to make their pull-out quotes stand out a little bit. Some of them put them up above on the front page right underneath the title, and some of them do pull-out quotes right in the middle of the text articles. So look for some examples and see what you can find there, and let's go ahead and move on to our next magazine, Sailing Safely, Sailing the Seas of Life. So I'm assuming it's Sailing Safely the Seas of Life. That's a little bit confusing, and so I'd recommend seeing what we could do about the title so that it reads correctly. Because I'm not quite sure if it's Sailing the Seas of Life Safely or Sailing Safely the Seas of Life. Just gets a little bit confusing in there. I like the picture here. I like that it's bleeding to the edge all around, and not knowing what the rest of the picture looks like behind this white text box, I wonder if you couldn't put white text on top of the picture and get rid of that white bounding box completely. Don't take away from the picture when you could actually use a contrasting color, but do so tastefully. That's something you have to really be careful about. If it doesn't look good, don't do it. And so try it and say, we're going to change the text to white, and does it show up on there? Do we need to add a drop shadow behind the text? A subtle drop shadow that just gives it the contrast it needs to make it stand out. Those are things to think about. And I would just say open up a magazine and see what color of text do other magazines put on an image that they have placed in if they're putting text over top. I really like the concept. I love that it's bleeding. It looks like a unique picture. Let's see if there's any more in here. So we have your contrasting typography. We have the subheading. That's great. I see some hyphens in here, and that's going to be a big thing I'm going to be really opposing is I don't want to see any hyphens. And here I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all on the first page. And so watch the video I provided on Facebook, because you're going to see how you can get rid of those hyphens really easily and what you can do to really improve this. Whether you need this vertical bar or not down the middle, that's up to you, but I don't think it's needed necessarily. It seems to divide. That's something I would do if I was going to do a quote on one side, or a calendar, or a list of events, or something that relates to the overall, but it's up to you. I think it looks good. So those are the main things. Work on your title a little bit. Make sure you have another picture for your other pages. I want to see pages 2 and 3 in your final submission, and so on. Oh, and it looks like maybe they are actually. Yep, here we go. So here we have our text wrapping, and again, a lot of hyphens, but your text wrapping is looking really good. So this is where you can do some of the kerning adjustments that I demonstrate in the video. So be thinking about that. Nice pull out quote over here. I hesitate with the third typeface being added in, the purpose, rudder, and home port. The rule of thumb really is you want to stick to 2 typefaces, and where you've already used a serif and a sans serif, coming in with this somewhat decorative script handwritten approach is a little bit distracting. It is something that you probably will want to change on that. Let's see. One thing that I'd make sure and do is add a space after each paragraph. See how over here on your third page we have this last line. It says to decide and to love. And then the next paragraph, it looks like, starts right below, but it really just looks like it got bumped down by accident. We need to differentiate those paragraphs in here. If you're having a hard time making things fit, then use the leading setting, because right now it's probably on auto. If your text is 12 point, then your automatic leading is probably 14.4. And I bet if you increased or decreased it even to just 14, you would be able to make everything fit on the page and still have those spaces. And by the time you do your text wrapping and everything, that's going to make a big difference as well. So watch that video. Looks great. So let's move to the next. Isabel, you've done some wonderful critiquing. Good work. Students, you have someone to follow as your role model on the critiques. Isabel has really gone out doing these draw overs for you. So she's raised the bar a bit. I expect all of you to be critiquing this week as well. That's part of the assignment. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this next magazine. We have The Practice of Choosing Faith. And here we have a nice contrast in the typography from the title, and good contrast with our subs. One thing that I might recommend with your subtitles would be to use the same serif font that you used for your title. And that way you have a little bit more contrast. But I like what you've done here, where you've used the same sub or the same typeface, but you've chosen to go with a bolder font here. So we have the sans serif and the sans serif, but here you're using bold and regular. So that's great. I do see a few hyphens in here, so keep that in mind and eliminate those hyphens. Watch my video on Facebook if you're wondering how to do so. Make sure and let's add some contrast between each paragraph. You've got to add that extra space. So just push enter and have a new paragraph. We have this picture of the temple as well. Things are looking really great here. One thing I would do is when it comes to scriptures like this, where you've done this scripture in here, is let's make that your pull-out quote. Let's add some contrast. What can we do to make that scripture stand out? Do we make the font size 2 points smaller and italicized? Do we make it another color? Do we put a box around it? What can we do to make that flow a little better? Text wrapping is looking good. It could be cleaned up just a tiny bit so that we're equal. Notice the space on the left is a bit wider than the space on the right. And that's where adjusting your kerning settings will come in very handy. Your pullout quote is in kind of a script font, and I don't see that being used anywhere else, and it's actually applying a third typeface to your piece. So I'd make sure and change that. Go ahead and use your serif typeface or even one of your sans serifs, but you know, the color adds a nice contrast, and maybe you make it a couple points larger like it is here, so it's a little bit different than the rest of the text, but don't use the third typeface. That's the big thing that we're going to have to push on here. Okay, so also remember, you need to use your own pictures. I want to see 2 pictures by you. I'm assuming that at least the top one wasn't by you, but I can't say for sure. I think the temple picture could possibly be by you, but I don't know that either. Let's go ahead and move on to the Temple of Nauvoo. Okay. I really like what you've done here. I love the white text on the picture. We might see what we can do about finding a couple ways to contrast. Notice that by President Howard W. Hunter Nauvoo Temple site, Nauvoo overlaps that flower a little bit, and it's just a little bit difficult to read there. And that could result just in placing this somewhere else or putting a little bit of a shadow behind Nauvoo. But if you're going to add drop shadows to your text, we really want subtle. I don't want to see obvious shadows. When it comes to your subtitles, I don't think I would recommend going quite this large. I'd really try and just make them just a little bit different than the regular text font, and just a little bit larger, but not this much larger. It's just a little bit too much, especially when it's taking up the 2 lines like this. Let's look at the next page. We have this picture in Carthage. Looks great. You've done nice text wrapping around here. I'm a little bit concerned because notice how narrow this column is. That's going to be really hard to adjust with your text when you start playing with your kerning and leading. So a couple of things to consider would be, one, if you removed the yellow border, that's going to give you a little bit more freedom. But because that yellow border is there, you're giving yourself another almost 1/4 inch margin that you have to observe. And when you start working with the kerning on these individual lines, you're going to really struggle because you're talking about 2 words and 3 words max on each of these lines. And that's going to be really hard to right align this. If you watch the kerning video on Facebook that I put up, it's that I'm asking you to left and right align your typography. And that's going to be really challenging on this part. Maybe what you do is you actually make this an oval, like an egg shape, and text wrap around that on both sides. That could be fun. It could look really good. And it will give you some good text wrapping experience around something circular. You could just make it a circle even. And then we got this divide down the middle. This is unique. I've never seen that for sure in a magazine. One of the things that is quite difficult is when you're choosing 2 colors, you got to find a neutral color that is going to allow your text to be read on, whether it's a light text or a dark text. So here we have this yellow and this white, and you're using black, and I can see the contrast there, so I'm not worried about that, but that would be something to be careful about. One thing that I am worried about, maybe, let's see, we have the temple and we have Nauvoo in this script font. We have this sans serif, and then we have this serif with your text. There are certain times I'm okay with a third typeface, and this is an example where in the title, I really consider the title to almost be an image, not necessarily the type. But with your pull-out quote, we probably need that to be in your serif or your sans serif. I wouldn't recommend introducing that third one in your regular type, especially because you have your subheadings in your sans serif and your text in the serif. Looks really good. I like where you're going with this. I love the bleed of your title page with your image bleeding to the edge on all 4 sides. That really adds to it. So let's go ahead and we'll move to the next. Brighter and brighter until the perfect day. Now, this we're off to a great start. I like that you're trying to bleed your picture. Remember, your picture needs to bleed to the edge of all sides of your magazine on this case. Okay, I don't want to see a white stripe at the top or the right. And then one of the things that I want to point out is in here we have this contrasting typography with the serif in brighter and brighter, and then the sans serif until the perfect day, and then all of the text is in the sans serif. And notice the white stroke around all of the text. This is something that I do not want to see. I'm going to have to ask you to remove the stroke or the outer glow, whatever you've done here. It's very hard for the viewer to read because of this added stroke. You really have to think about what you're reading. And one of the things that you want to do as a magazine editor or writer is you've got to create something that easily sets on the eyes and that your client or your reader can see and not want to just turn the page. This is something that it's going to strain their eyes and they're going to get tired and they're going to put the magazine down. It also looks unclean. The idea is to choose a typeface that is dark enough that it can be read, that it contrasts your image. And so that would be my biggest recommendation there. I want to see page 2 and 3. I need to see some subheadings. We want to see 2 pictures by you. So really there's quite a bit to do. Some of the things that we got to talk about: keep your font size 12 points. Notice that your text is coming right to the edge of your picture, and you really need to observe margins, whether you have padding from your picture around your text or whether you have the picture bleeding off the edge. You need to observe the margins. And here where the text comes right to the edge of the picture, that's really also something that you want to avoid. We got to get rid of these hyphens. So watch the kerning video on Facebook. Most of you are going to probably hear that. Can't emphasize it enough. So let's go ahead and look at the next. Okay, so here we have the light of the church. Now, one of the things that I would recommend is in this piece, we really need to see a title page. I'm assuming that there probably is one. Here we have these 2 pages. So let's get a third title page in here. I really like that you've added this picture of this flower. I hope it's a picture that you took. Remember, you're going to need to include 2 pictures that you take. But then I want to see what we can do about softening up the text. The black is quite harsh on the eyes. It's quite bold. It's a little bit overbearing. So I would look at finding a thinner typeface and even changing the color. When you double click on the color on your color palette, you could probably even just go down to change your black to 80%. It still keeps it dark gray, but it takes away the harsh blackness that we're seeing here. Also, notice this, we got this page cut in half with this green half and this white half, but notice the stroke on there. We're running a black stroke through the text, and so I would get rid of the stroke. So you're going to want to look at your stroke and make it 0 in InDesign. It can sometimes be a bit challenging to figure out why that stroke is there, because a lot of times they're automatically there. We have a stroke around your image here, and that again, you'll want to basically you select it by clicking on it and then go to your window and stroke and just change it to 0 so that it's not there. So I would work a little bit on softening the text, adding some pictures, adding a title page, and then playing with your typography. I would make sure that in here, for example, you have a space after this paragraph, but here you don't, and here you don't. Afterwards, you didn't add a space after any of your paragraphs, and so we got to add that contrasting in there as well. We do have our pull-out quotes, so great job there. So really, it's just minor editing now. It's something that you can do. So I'll look forward to seeing the next, and let's move on. Here we have Nurturing Marriage by Russell M. Nelson. Beautiful picture of the Provo Temple. I feel like perhaps the font size of your text is a little bit large here. I don't know for sure, but it looks like it's a little bit larger than 12 points. So keep that in mind. I wouldn't go larger than 12. It just seems to be just a little bit larger. And I see some hyphens in there, so we'll want to work with the kerning settings. We have this picture of the bride and groom. I wonder if we couldn't maybe cut them out in a circle, especially since there's really notice that there's no foreground in this picture. Remember, as we went through photography last week and we were talking about the rule of thirds, notice that their feet got cut off and the bottom of her dress got cut off. Maybe that's just the way it's placed in there. I know that with InDesign, if you used a photo placement box, then there's a good chance you have extra image. So use your direct selection tool, your white arrow, and just click on that, and then just move it up if there's room within, because it's a lot of times it's acting as a window. One thing I'd also point out is notice the alignment or the lack of the alignment. The left side of this picture does not align with the left side of the text in this column, and that's something I would watch out for. Make sure that your images fill the entire column. You're really working with a grid when it comes to typography. All of these little numbers from the references, I would make those small, and you can do that in your character palette. You can either manually do it, or you can just select them and then say make subtype or small capitals or something like that. There's several different options. So experiment with that a little bit. Let's get rid of the hyphens here. Watch the video that I put up. Also, notice the margin on the left side here is quite a bit greater than the one on the right. So let's make sure your margins are consistent. We have this pull-out text here. Let's observe some margins with it. Notice that some of this is coming right to the edge. But one other thing that I want to see if we can't work on a little bit is, let's see here. Let's add some contrast in your subtitles, okay? We have a serif and a serif. Your text is all in a serif, so let's change that doctrinal foundation to your sans serif so that you contrast. Or, I mean, really the rule of thumb would be that you use the same typeface that you used for the word marriage. See, you used it in your pullout quote, I think. No, that's not the same actually. So you've introduced a third. So let's make sure and get consistent. And remember the rule of two fonts, two typefaces here. We want, if you're going to use this script, then use the script for your subheadings in your quote. And then leave your text as it is, or change it to something else that you like, depending on what you think and how it looks and if it's readable. Script fonts can be difficult to read a lot of text in, so keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay, flooding the earth with the Book of Mormon. And we have page 2 and page 3. Okay. So one of the things that I noticed right away is that you've used your typography. We have everything set in a serif typeface, and that's great, but we need to see some contrast in there. So let's see what we can do about changing the title to maybe a sans serif typeface, and then keeping all of the text in the serif, or switching that around. Maybe all of your text can be in the sans serif typeface. You've used nice pictures, but one of the things that you got to remember is these need to be pictures you have taken. And just a little twist that I notice is the picture here on the back. I'm pretty sure this picture is from the Broadway musical called The Book of Mormon. And while it's a great picture, it adds a little bit of a parody to this, because the musical is actually anti-LDS. It's made by the makers of South Park. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but I'd recommend not using that picture because of its purpose. But another thing I'd recommend is let's eliminate these yellow text boxes. Notice that they come right to the edge of your text and there's no padding around it. And the other thing is you've used the justification tool on everything. And so notice we've got these little gaps everywhere in between all of the words. And we've got to get rid of that. And so you want to use your left alignment and then manually adjust these like I showed you in the kerning video. So look at that on Facebook. So it's off to a great start, but there's still some work to do. I want to see some larger images. I want to see these bleed off the picture. I want to see pictures that you took. And it will turn out to be a really great piece. So you've put a lot of work into it. Good work on that. And let's go ahead and move on. Let's see what we have still to go. We have a lot left here, so I'm talking way too much. So we'll hurry and get going. Let's see here. It isn't a sin to be weak. I really like this picture in here. I want to see how we can maybe add some contrast or maybe wrap around the picture. I have a hard time putting text over top of images and making it look good. So that's something I want you to think about. Think about your text size. Think about your hyphens in your right alignment versus your left alignment. I really like your border and your title. I wonder if we'd remove the white bar and just keep the open space behind your picture. Because the picture is light enough that really that white bar kind of actually takes away from it. So I'd remove that white bar. Now I also see three typefaces in here. Our title is this kind of modern slab serif font. It's kind of a different one. And then we have this sans serif by Wendy Ulrich, serif for everything else. So I would make sure your subtitles are either a sans serif or your text is a sans serif. Let's contrast those and let's get rid of the third font and be consistent. See what we can do there. And let's move to the next. Also remember, you'll want to be using your own pictures. Okay. And okay, and these are both yours as well. Okay, I love your text wrapping here. You could tighten it up a little bit on the left side, but it's looking great. I like that you're emphasizing the word clean, but that's introducing even another font in here. And so you're going to want to avoid that. Remember, we're really talking about two typefaces in this whole piece. And that includes pull-out quotes and titles and everything. So work on that. Remember, two pictures by you, hyphens, alignment. It's looking great. I do want to see the front page. Oh, never mind. It's there. I'm sorry. So you've done a great job. You're almost there. Just a few of these minor changes will really make this look like a nice magazine spread. Okay, the happiness for those we love. We have this nice picture of flowers. We have a stroke around these, which I'm going to ask that we remove. We need to get rid of, we don't put strokes around body text. The idea is that we're using color or images artfully or tastefully so that we don't have to create barriers with our type. That's the main thing that I see immediately here. Let's see. And then we have these additional pages. We've started doing some text wrapping. So working with the kerning a little bit, we'll clean that up. The good thing is I don't see any hyphens. So that's a great start. One thing that I might recommend though, I feel like the text is just a little bit large. Let's remember that we want to stick with 12 points. And let's find a different way to add the contrast. Maybe make this a serif typeface. I'm okay with the text box around it, but it's not necessary, so it's up to you if you want to keep it or not. And I'd recommend that we remove this colored background, this kind of yellow, orange, gold color behind it. I don't see that in magazines when I look through them. If there's color in the background, it's usually because it's an image, but it's not just that they colored the page. So I want you to see what you can do about that. And I'd like to see the text wrapping cleaned up around these two little girls a little bit. It's looking great, but there's a few things you can do to just clean that up. And you'll see how to do that on the video that I provided on Facebook. Here we have Choose to Believe. And the great thing about this is we got this great picture of this river and this sunset, but most of it's hidden by the text. And that's one of the things that I really discourage. I would recommend finding a way not to do that, because it kind of takes away from it. But I love that you've taken this first step in doing so, and by placing the text over this image, and it's a great cover photo. And maybe it just has the title and the name of the author in the sunset or up in the sky, and you leave that blank, and you're able to make everything fit on your second and third page. And you could do that to your leading and your other typography settings. I believe you could make all of your text fit. You've done a great job starting your text wrapping here. Your leading, which is the space between the lines, is a little bit heavy. You could decrease that a bit and maybe make the font not so black. Soften it up a little bit, like maybe 90% black or 80% black in your color settings. So it's just a dark charcoal color or gray. Let's see here. We got our as well. A lot of these, like the Never Give Up, I'm sure you could fit that on one line, and then you could keep the text wrapping going around these rounded corners. Main thing is, remember, you need to use two of your own pictures here. So look for that and work on your alignment and your typography a little bit, and it will be great. See what you can do about that cover picture and placing text over it. I'd just see if we couldn't change that a little bit. Let's move on. We have this next piece here. Cast Not Away Thy Confidence by Elder Jeffrey R. Holland. This looks really nice. I love the picture right in the middle like this and bleeding on the left and the right off the edges of your page. Nice little bar down here. This would be a great place to add a page number and maybe even the title of your magazine or something. You'll see that a lot in the footers. I like the contrast, clean look. The one thing that I think would make it cleaner would be, look at Cast Not Away Therefore Thy Confidence. What could we do to either bring confidence up on the same line or maybe bring thy confidence below, and maybe in a contrasting typeface or something, or cast not away, or emphasize a certain word in your title or something, but at least move thy down to the next line, or move confidence up to the first line, so that we aren't leaving confidence all alone. I know he's confident and he's okay being alone, but let's make him look and appear more confident by being with some of his friends. That would be the big thing there. Another thing that would really clean this up would just be the simple alignment on the right side, because your page is so nice and white and crisp. It's wonderful looking. So I would say make it right aligned, work on your kerning and make that all fit, and I think it would look really nice. I look forward to seeing the remaining. In fact, maybe it is, no? Okay, let's see. So Samantha. Okay, so this is the only one you could get to upload. So we'll look forward to seeing the rest. And then let's look and see this piece here. We have, looks like this is in Idaho Falls, by the Idaho Falls Temple is my assumption. Yep, that is correct. And I love this talk as well. So I want to see a title page, and apparently, oh, and here we go, the atonement. Here we go, perfect. Okay, so if this is your title page, I'd see what we could do about adding some contrast in here. We have this white and then the white temple right on it, and that's really difficult to see and appreciate because there's just not much contrast there. And then we got this blue footer at the bottom that I'm not sure what it is. But I love the completion of all of this. I see pull-out quotes and subheadings. Let's look at the typography for a minute. We've used a contrasting typeface here. I do see some jagged edges here, which can be cleaned up with the kerning settings. So I look forward to seeing that. Overall, looks great. That would be the main thing, is we're going to work on the typography now with the kerning and the getting rid of any of these jagged edges, and then working on a different cover picture for the temple, I think, is what would really help on that. So I'll look forward to seeing that. Let's go ahead. What is marriage? We have this picture of the temple and this couple, and they're kind of watermarked in there. Gets a little bit busy up in here, so I'd see what you can do about that. See if you can clean it up. Maybe not so bold of a font. Maybe a little bit smaller font size as well. We have this contrast between these fonts. Let's look at the next pages. So one of the things that I want to see is I'd like to see this font that What is Marriage is in. I would like to see that applied somewhere else in here. Maybe in the pull-out quote. Maybe in this pull-out quote as well. Maybe in both of them. I'd like to see some text wrapping cleaned up a little bit here. Let's get these nice and aligned all the way around, so it creates a box around the picture with your text. And then you still, it's actually possible to even set this so it looks like a circle inside, like your text follows the shape of the circle, and that can be done with your kerning settings as well. And so good luck with that. That one could be a little bit more confusing typing in a path that way, but it can be done. So maybe what you could do is search the internet and say, how do I write text inside of a shape so that it follows the shape? I've seen some great examples. I've done it, and it can look really cool when it's done right. So I'd love to see what you can do there. I'm going to move to the next. Here we have this picture. We have the prophet Joseph Smith said this about the Book of Mormon. The Book of Mormon, another testament of Jesus Christ. So one of the things that I immediately see here is I see three fonts. We have the title, we have the subtitle, and we have this pull-out quote in this papyrus type font. So we want to eliminate one of those. I would recommend not putting two serif fonts together. I would find a sans serif font that you can use for the pull-out quote and the subheading there. I'm not totally sure. I see this picture and this quote or this scripture, but I don't think this is an image that you took. I think this is one that you added, and so that's something you're going to want to watch. The main thing here is you've got to take two pictures, and you've got to apply them to this piece. And so really this is obsolete. It's not needed. This picture here, I don't think you took either. So you're going to want to find a picture and really read what the talk says and apply pictures that you take to the text. Let's look at the third page for a minute. So we have this cover of the Book of Mormon. So let's do a little more text dropping around that. Let's decrease the leading a little bit, the spacing between the lines. I hope you don't highlight all of the subheadings. So we're really off to a great start, but there's a lot to do still here. We need to see the whole talk. We want to see it all in as one magazine page. This looks like three different articles, and we really want your entire magazine spread to flow like it's actually one magazine story. look in a magazine and see how do they make it look consistent from page to page. And that's going to help a lot. Okay. So here, it appears that we have a complete spread here over 2 pages, and then the same here and here. And so really you're looking at, I don't know if this is just because you screenshot and you didn't do the whole thing, but we really want to avoid the 3 pages. Is this your, I'm not sure if this is your blog, but this, are you using InDesign? I guess that's the first question we need to ask. And then we're really only asking for 3 pages, a title page and a spread. I'm pretty sure you didn't take these pictures inside the temple or outside of the temple, so remember you need to apply your own images. And we'll go from there. And then typography, let's see here, we have the serif and the sans serif. We have, excuse me, we have your title here, public invited to tour Paris, France temple. And we have this quote down here. I don't see it. Let's see, okay. So it really looks more like a flyer than a magazine page. If this is a magazine spread, then I assume it's going to fold in half right here, and you're going to cover up, you're going to lose text in the fold. And so you really don't want to cross text over a spread. Same story here especially. So this will be interesting to see the final layout. Be sure if we're just looking at a portion of the page or if we're looking at 2 pages side by side. I would also consider removing the purple background in there. I really don't recommend just making pages colored, but create something that contrasts, whether it's just the color of the page and your text, or if it's an image behind the text or something like that. Okay, folks, things are looking good. There's a lot of work left to do, but I have faith in each of you. I'm excited to see what you can do this week. I wish you all the best and good luck.